There are towns in Alberta right now where you can buy a full house, four walls, a roof, sometimes a whole quarter acre, for less than the down payment on a Calgary condo. And here is the part that should stop you. Almost nobody is buying them. You would think a price that low would start a bidding war. It does not. These houses sit. Some of them sit for a year. Some of them sit for 3. And your first instinct, the same instinct I had, is that something must be wrong with them. You are partly right. Something is wrong with the town, not always the house. The job that used to be there left. The population that used to fill those streets got smaller every single year since the 1980s. And when nobody is moving in, nobody is bidding, and the price just keeps drifting down until it lands somewhere that sounds almost fake. But here is the good news: nobody in this niche is telling you. A town that emptied out because the mine closed, or the mill shut down, or the young people left for Calgary, is not a town that stopped being livable. It is a town where the math finally works in your favor, instead of against you. Today, 10 Alberta towns where the houses cost next to nothing, where the market has gone almost completely silent, and where that silence is exactly why the right buyer, someone retired, someone remote, someone who wants land and quiet more than they want a subway line, should be paying close attention. Stay until number 1, because the price on that one made me go back and check the listing twice. Let's take a look. Number 10. Coleman, Alberta, in the Crow's Nest Pass. Coleman is one of 5 small communities strung along Highway 3 in the far southwest corner of the province, in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains. It used to be a coal town, and for decades it was a good one. Miners came from across Europe, built churches and union halls, and the Crow's Nest Pass produced coal that heated half of Western Canada. The coal mines closed decades ago, one after another, and the towns along the highway never fully replaced that income. What is left is genuinely beautiful. Real mountains, not postcard mountains, right at the edge of town. Trails, a ski hill nearby, and a downtown of old brick buildings that remember a busier time. My honest assessment: winters here are long, and the nearest full hospital is in Lethbridge, over an hour away. But if you are retired, work remotely, or simply want a mountain view without a mountain town price tag, Coleman is close to unbeatable. The average home value here sits in the low 200,000s, a fraction of anything comparable near Canmore or Banff, 2 hours north. But the next town on this list is cheaper still, and it does not have a mountain view to explain the price. Number 9. Wrentham, Alberta, in the dry prairie south of Lethbridge. Wrentham is barely a village anymore. A grid of streets, a grain elevator that no longer operates, and a population you could fit in a school gymnasium. Southern Alberta's small prairie hamlets emptied out the same way most of rural Canada did. Farms consolidated, family operations became corporate operations, and the people those smaller farms used to employ moved to the cities. What is left in Wrentham is flat, open, quiet land, big prairie sky, and a housing stock that is almost entirely older bungalows on generous lots. My honest assessment: there is no grocery store in town, no hospital, and the nearest full services are a real drive. This is not a place for someone who needs amenities nearby, but for a cash buyer who wants acreage, silence, and a place to keep animals or grow something. The price makes almost anywhere else in the country look absurd. Homes here have sold for under $100,000. Property taxes on a home this size run a few $100s a year, but the next town still has people in it, which is more than you can say for number 8. Number 8. Rosalind, Alberta, east of Camrose in the flat farm country of central Alberta. Rosalind is a hamlet that peaked when the branch rail line still ran through it. The rail line is gone, the grain business consolidated into a handful of massive terminals elsewhere, and the town that used to service local farmers shrank down to its bones. A few dozen houses, a community hall, and land in every direction. My honest assessment. There is genuinely very little here. No hospital, no real employment base, and winter driving on rural grid roads that can be rough. But the reframe is simple. If your income does not depend on a local job, if it is a pension, CPP and OAS, remote work, or savings, then the emptiness that scared away every other buyer becomes the entire selling point. Nobody bidding against you, nobody driving the price up. Homes here have listed in the $60,000 to $90,000 range. And if you think that number is hard to believe, the next town will make you check your math twice. We are 5 towns in. I want to say something before we keep going. Every single town on this list so far has the same story underneath it. A resource left, or a rail line closed, or a farm got bigger and needed fewer people, and the town that depended on that one thing never found a second thing to depend on. That is not a moral failing of the town. That is just what happens to a single industry economy when the industry moves on. Keep that pattern in mind, because the next 5 towns follow it exactly, and the prices get even harder to believe. If you are the kind of person who would rather own 5 acres outright than rent a view of somebody else's 5 acres, you and I think the same way. Subscribe, because the back half of this list is where the real numbers are. Number 7. Wanham, Alberta, in the Peace Country of the far north. Wanham sits along Highway 2, a couple hours northwest of Prairie, in a region built on farming, forestry, and oil and gas service work. When commodity prices soften, this whole region feels it fast, and Wanham has been feeling a slow population decline for years, as families move toward Prairie for schools and jobs. What is left is inexpensive land, a real small-town main street, and a farming community that still functions, just with fewer people in it every census. My honest assessment. The nearest hospital of any real size is in Prairie, close to an hour away, and winters in the Peace Country are genuinely cold, well below anything most Canadians experience. But heating a small, well-built house here costs a fraction of what you would spend heating a similarly cheap house anywhere in Ontario, because Alberta's provincial utility structure and natural gas access keep the bill lower than the climate alone would suggest. Homes in Wanham have sold in the $70,000 to $110,000 range. The next town trades the cold for something else entirely. Number 6. Cereal, Alberta, out in the badlands of the Far East, close to the Saskatchewan border. Cereal may be the smallest name on this entire list, a hamlet in the driest, most sparsely populated corner of the province. It was built as a grain point on a branch rail line that stopped running decades ago, and like the rail towns before it, the population that depended on that line never found a replacement. What remains is genuinely stark, open badlands and prairie in every direction, a landscape some people find bleak and others find the most honest kind of beautiful in the country. My honest assessment. This is about as remote as this list gets. No hospital, minimal services, and you are planning your grocery runs around a real drive. This is not for someone who needs a neighbor within shouting distance, but for a hunter, a retiree who wants total privacy, or someone building a small off-grid style property. Land and structures here have changed hands for well under $50,000. The average home value on record for the hamlet sits near $40,000. That is the price of a used pickup truck for an actual house on actual land. Number 5. Bruderheim, Alberta, northeast of Edmonton in industrial heartland country. This one is the surprise on the list, because unlike the others, Bruderheim is not isolated. It sits close enough to Edmonton and Fort Saskatchewan's massive industrial complex that you would expect prices to have followed the region up. They have not fully. Bruderheim's population has stayed essentially flat for years, while towns closer to Edmonton's core boomed, and that stagnation kept the housing market quiet, even with major industrial investment happening less than half an hour away. My honest assessment: this is genuinely one of the more livable towns on this list. A real grocery store, a K-12 school, and Fort Saskatchewan's hospital a short drive away. The catch is that it is an industrial corridor, and if the sight or sound of heavy industry on the horizon bothers you, this is not your town. But for the price and the drive to Edmonton convenience, it is hard to beat. Homes here have sold in the $150,000 to $200,000 range for properties that would run well over $500,000 inside Edmonton city limits. The next four towns get harder to believe, not easier. Number 4, Big Valley, Alberta, in the Badlands southeast of Red Deer. Big Valley was a booming rail divisional point a century ago, complete with a roundhouse that still stands as a small museum today. When the railway restructured its operations away from the town, Big Valley lost its reason to exist almost overnight, and it has been quietly shrinking ever since, down to a population you can count in the low hundreds. What survived is a genuinely charming hamlet, the historic roundhouse, badlands scenery nearby, and a slower pace of life than almost anywhere else on this list. My honest assessment: employment locally is essentially non-existent, so this only works if your income travels with you, a pension, remote work, savings. But the roundhouse tourism brings a small trickle of visitors and keeps the town from feeling completely forgotten. Homes here have sold in the $60,000 to $100,000 range. The next town is bigger, closer to a real city, and somehow still cheaper than you would expect. Number 3, Youngstown, Alberta, in the dry farm country of the southeast. Youngstown is a farming hamlet that has been losing population steadily since the post-war decades, as farm consolidation across this whole stretch of Alberta shrank the number of families the land could support. What is left is a small grid of homes, a school that has faced closure pressure more than once as enrollment thins, and grainland stretching to the horizon in every direction. My honest assessment: if the local school closes, that is usually the signal a hamlet is entering its final, steepest decline, and a buyer here should watch that closely before committing. But right now, today, the price reflects a level of risk that a cash buyer with no mortgage and no local job dependency does not actually need to worry about. Homes in Youngstown have sold for well under $70,000, some considerably less. That is the entire cost of housing, solved, for less than a year of rent in Calgary. Number 2, Consort, Alberta, near the Saskatchewan border in east-central Alberta. Consort has held on better than most towns this far from a major city, anchored by a genuine small hospital, a K-12 school, and a farm and oil service economy that has kept it more stable than its neighbors. Population has still declined slowly over the decades, the same story as everywhere on this list, just told more gently here. What makes Consort worth including this high is the combination: real infrastructure, a functioning downtown, and a price that has not caught up to what that infrastructure is actually worth. My honest assessment: it is remote, a real drive from Red Deer or Saskatoon, and winters are the full Prairie experience. But for the services included, this may be the single best value on the entire list. Homes here have sold in the $90,000 to $140,000 range for a town with an actual hospital and an actual school, which is more than half of this list can say. But number 1 is the town that made me stop and recheck the listing. Number 1, Wabamun, Alberta, west of Edmonton on the shores of Wabamun Lake. For most of the 20th century, this was a coal and power town, home to massive coal-fired generating stations that anchored the local economy for generations. Alberta's phase out of coal power closed those plants down over the last several years, and Wabamun lost its core industry almost overnight. The same story as Coleman at number 10, just decades later, and on a lake instead of in the mountains. What makes this the #1 town on this list is what the coal industry leaves behind. A genuine lake community, beaches, boating, fishing, 45 minutes from downtown Edmonton, at a price that is not caught up to what lakefront access this close to a major city should cost anywhere else in the country. My honest assessment: the power plant closures hit local employment hard, and you will see that history in the town's pace. This is not a booming resort market. But for a retiree, a remote worker, or a Calgary or Edmonton buyer who wants a lake property without a lake property price, Wabamun may be the most underpriced address in this entire video. The average home value here has sat in the $200,000 range for lakefront adjacent property, 45 minutes from a city of over 1 million people. Rewind that number if you need to hear it again.
So here is the thread that ties all 10 of these towns together, and it comes down to exactly 3 forces. First, the industry that built each town: coal, rail, grain, a single mine or mill, either closed or shrank down to a fraction of what it once employed, and none of these towns ever replaced it with something else. Second, Alberta's overall cost of living stayed low relative to the rest of the country. No provincial sales tax, competitive property tax rates, and in most of these towns, natural gas heating that keeps winter bills far more manageable than the climate alone would suggest. Third, and this is the part that turns all of it into an opportunity instead of a problem: if your income does not depend on a job in the town itself, a pension, CPP, and OAS, remote work, or savings, none of the reasons these towns emptied out actually apply to you. The empty market that scared away everyone else becomes the exact reason nobody is bidding against you. Whether you are looking to retire somewhere quiet, work remotely from somewhere nobody else wants to live, or you are simply someone who does the math before making a big decision, I hope this list gave you something worth thinking about. Those are 10 Alberta towns where a house costs next to nothing, and where that low price is not a red flag. It is a market nobody else has discovered yet. Subscribe, and tell me in the comments which one of these 10 you would actually move to. We will see you in the next one.